Welcome everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us for the parent seminar. We have a good group of kids out here. For those of you who didn't come to the opening ceremonies, I'm Tarek Merchant, and so I'm the founder, director of the Collegiate Exposure Camps. And I'll give you guys a quick background about myself and what we do. And I would like to go into a discussion about your son and daughter's, college recruiting, their goals, and what they're going to get out of this camp, and how to move forward as you guys have those goals for your kids to play college tennis. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss. We could probably sit here for weeks and days and do it, but I'll give you as much of an overview as I can, following some thoughts that I have that I feel are very, very important to discuss and put in the front of our minds, and then I'll leave it up for a little question and answer, and then we plan to get in touch with you guys after the camp and have an opportunity to speak with you and then learn more about your personal situation. If you're not already somebody that works with us or needs some help, that's something we can discuss, certainly. And we're happy to advise you guys in whichever way is best for you. So let me give you guys a quick background about myself and how I got into this business and started. I grew up in Canada. I played all sports, tennis. I grew up in a city, Kingston, which was in between Toronto and Montreal. There wasn't a whole lot of tennis going on. There was only an indoor club and a small outdoor club, and winter was 8 months of the year. So I played ice hockey and baseball and soccer and everything else. And when I was about 8 years old, my dad put me in tennis classes with my sisters, and I really enjoyed it. And my dad, being somebody that liked tennis a lot, something we used to do together, watch on TV. So we would watch Wimbledon and all the Grand Slams and go to some matches here and there. So as I started growing up, as a teenager, I got more and more into tennis. One is because I was pretty good at it and I liked it, but also because I ended up having some good friends around there and then some really good coaches. So when that environment hits and you're having a lot of fun in it, you just continue to develop and grow. I kept playing all the other sports until about 15, 16. At that time, I realized for my last few years of high school, I have to pick something if I want to take it to the collegiate level. I always knew that I wanted to do something in sports at the collegiate level. So I worked at that with coaches and a team, and I've got my chance to play. But my story's different to anybody else's because I think everybody has their own story. But in my case, I had scholarship opportunities and chances to go play in the US, and then I decided I didn't want to. Not really sure why, but I just somehow in my senior year, I just decided maybe I got into, the only school I got into, because I wasn't the greatest student, book smart wise, academically, was I got into the best school I could at McGill University, and I got rejected from everywhere else. And most of my friends didn't even get to go to that school. So I don't know what it was. If it was a bit of that, it was a bit of, I just want to stay at home. Although I did go to a boarding school for my last few years. I wasn't scared to travel or meet new people, but I decided to turn those down. And then all of a sudden in June, right after I graduated, I got a call from one of the coaches at Western New Mexico University who was scouting and recruiting me. And he said, look, I still have that spot available. It's a great scholarship. It's a great opportunity. Why don't you do it? And I don't know what triggered me, but I remember getting off the phone in my living room, and my dad asked me, who was it? And I said, it's that coach again, from Western New Mexico. He really wants me to come. And he says, I don't know why you wouldn't go try it. And so, I don't know, I guess I thought maybe I should. I asked my coach, who was also my housemaster and a father to me, and he said the same thing. And both of them said you can always go and come back. And so I don't know if it was a fear thing or what, but I ended up taking it, and that was the greatest decision I ever made. I spent 2 years at that school. I went starting at number 5 singles, worked my way up to 1, really worked my butt off in tennis, worked my butt off in the classroom, met some good people, loved the student athlete experience. Definitely had some ups and downs. Straight C's my first semester. Thought I was doing really well, very immature, but learned from all those experiences, and then transferred to Jacksonville University, which was the next level of tennis for me and next level of academics for me and job opportunities. It's interesting, once you are in school, when you're in high school, you start to think that tennis is everything or sports is everything. And then as you start going to school and you mature and you start getting into like your third year of university, and then you realize you start seeing the end of the road as far as tennis goes, you start thinking about your next step in life, your job, and opportunities and all that. So when I started to think about that, I figured Jacksonville is a great spot because they have Fortune 500 companies and technology that I like, finance, business opportunities, a really great tennis team, and everything I wanted to take me to the next level. So I did that for a couple years, but I was with a shoulder injury, a very bad shoulder injury, and that stopped me from playing my senior year. It stopped me from sort of living a normal life in some way. Like I went from being, a kid who never got injured seriously, who never had any problems, to not even being able to lift up my arm and comb my hair or wash, put on my t-shirt, and a lot of pain, and then not being able to do something that I loved, and the reason why I could was my driving force to finish school. So that was a difficult time, but at the same time, I learned a lot through it. I ended up getting an internship with the Orlando Magic basketball team right after sending 400 plus resumes to every sports team in the country, not hearing back from one, but getting that opportunity through my school's network. And then I got a job with Cliff Drysdale Tennis in Miami, teaching tennis, helping the high performance kids, directing one of the parks where they used to play the Miami Open. And then coming back to Canada, helping my dad with his real estate business and his other businesses, and starting what is now IMRecruitable, which is our recruiting side, and the Collegiate exposure camps, helping kids through these events and camps to help them get hands-on experiences and access to college coaches. And I think, I even spent, a summer or a whole year during my master's degree, which I did after I graduated, working at a hotel. So, I took and doing all kinds of odd jobs. So I found my path eventually, and I really utilized my interest in sports to get me to my passion, plus a business. I think, sometimes your hobbies can't support your businesses, but I found a way to make it work, and it was a struggle, but I think everything that I learned is something I can give back to the kids and teach them, just like all these college coaches and all you parents. You have your personal stories that you share with your kids, and you only want the best for them. So I have been now in the college recruiting space for over 10 years. We have built these collegiate exposure camps to be one of the staple type of exposure camps in the country and around the world. People come from everywhere. We get kids from Asia and Europe and South America, Canada, America, to get access to these coaches, to get that hands-on experience and opportunity to play with different kids. And there's so much value here. I really truly believe that. We try to make the experience as great as possible. The feedback's good from all the kids, and we keep trying to improve. So my experience is working with college coaches on a daily basis, helping them in the recruiting, is something that I have become very good at, that I think takes a lot of strategy, requires a lot of expertise, network connections, and I think that it's something that I can share with everybody. So recently I started going on social media and Instagram and Facebook and everything, and sharing my daily life and experiences that I have with college coaches, with players, with parents, just my personal advice. And I think that that is needed in today's day, because the reason why I started this business was because I went through the process. My friends did. All the kids that I played with in college, whether they were tennis players and my other friends that played soccer and baseball and everything, because when you're an athlete, you get access to all the athletes and everybody becomes good friends. You're going through a similar experience together as student athletes, and you're in an exclusive group. So all those friends I had, I realized that, people weren't educated, people weren't getting the right advice. There was this can be a very tricky business. Everyone wants access to these schools. We've heard about these recent scandals that have happened, where people are paying such big money to get their kids into school. And unfortunately, it's not the right way. Nobody wins in the end. You think you win, but you don't. Coaches are getting fired. Parents are losing their dignity and respect. Kids are not going anywhere, but getting kicked out of their schools. And at the end of the day, you want to have like the greatest student athlete experience that you can take with you to get the best, life jobs and opportunities and network. So, it's important for us to be transparent. The recruiting business is a business. Coaches are hired to get paid to win and do their job and bring in the best players possible. Some teams are way more competitive than others. Some are, but they're all academic focused, but at the same time, they need to do their job as a coach. And then you have on the other side, people that are trying to advise you and help you. And not everybody's in it for your interest. Sometimes it's self-interest. Sometimes it's the lack of their knowledge. I mean, the industry that I'm in is a very cool industry. Like, there's so many people that I know that just want to be a part of it. Oh, I know that coach. Oh, I'm friends with that guy. And they don't really know them. Oh, I'm going to start a recruiting company. It's like, you just don't start it. Like, you can, but you got to know people. You got to have some experience in it. And there's too many people popping up trying to do it. Just like other industries. Sports is really cool. There's lots of areas where people want to get into and don't really have that knowledge, expertise, and experience. And it took me a while to get that experience, but I feel like people are being swayed in different paths. Every day I'm talking to parents and players, and I can't remember a day that I haven't heard somebody say, "Oh, so-and-so told me this," and I'm like, it's not even accurate. It doesn't apply to you. It's frustrating for someone like me because I'm wondering where all this information's coming from. And I think on one hand, I empathize because there's a lot of parents, players, and individuals, whether it's coaches and your people who have had their other kids go through it, that are just trying to advise and help you out. But they don't realize how confusing that can make your personal situation and process, because what happened to them may not be the same case for you. And so if you start going down that path, you start getting more and more confused, or you start doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or maybe somebody did it like 10 years ago. Like, I'll tell you, 2002 when I got recruited is very different than what we're doing in 2019. Like, very, very different. And it changes drastically. It's just like any business. The way you market a business in 2002 versus how you market a business in today's era is completely different. The way you handle customers and all that stuff. So if you guys are in any of that sales and marketing businesses, or you receive emails and now you're getting marketed on social channels and you got Alexa voice and all these things, like, it's a very, very different world. And coaches have access to way more players than they ever have. So the competition is there. And I think that when we see that competition, the first instinct is to throw money at it, or just try, to do something, when really you actually need a plan. And so I realized through all of this that has gone on and the experiences I had and what I saw my friends go through, that we need to build a game plan. You need to go through certain steps in the process that everybody needs to go through. But you need to be prepared. You need to understand your situation academically, athletically, financially. Those are the three most important factors in your decision-making process, along with your preferences and needs and wants. But those can be negotiable and non-negotiable. Some things, you're not going to be able to get everything you want, especially if you're trying to be a student athlete, because you're forgetting that you also have to be recruited by that coach, right? They have to want you. So you may want to, certain schools may be the top of your list and fit all your needs, but if you don't fit what the coach wants, then there's no opportunity to play on that team. So I was telling the kids earlier today, what if you, look at professional sports, you get drafted, you don't have a choice, right? You go to the team that you get drafted with. The difference here is that we're dealing with academics as well. And of course that has to come into the factor. And also your budgets have to come into the factor. But you still have to be comfortable with not getting everything you want. So can you get the majority of what you want? And what are the things that are non-negotiable? And the other big thing that people forget is the development. So I get a lot of people coming to me junior and senior year, and they say, I'd like to go here and I'd like your help, and we can, this is my idea of the schools and does it fit, and tell me your advice, et cetera, et cetera. And although I can help, but I can help with the current situation. What's interesting and never talked about is doesn't development directly relate to your recruiting process and where you're going to fit? So as a high performance athlete, tennis player, baseball player, golfer, whatever sport you're playing, you must know what the minimum requirements are academically and athletically to get into the schools that you want to get into. And the earlier you understand that, and the earlier you set up a plan, the more opportunity you have to be successful. So that's one thing, right? So let's just say that, we took 5 schools and we said, okay, in order to have a potential opportunity at these schools, I need to be here on my GPA, on my SAT or ACT. If you're international, I need to have this TOEFL score. I need to have these academic credentials and requirements of these classes taken with these grades and GPA. And then on the tennis side, I need to have this type of ranking, this type of rating, and whatever that requirement may be. And then budget-wise, these are the schools that are going to likely cost me between this range, or these will be full scholarships, or they will be no scholarships, Division III schools, but I need that academic grades. So then you put that together, then the question becomes, okay, how do I actually give myself the best shot at getting there? And we can put a plan together and set the goals, but then who's monitoring it on a quarterly basis? Who's actually assessing to see if you're developing your game and that the results are speaking for themselves, that you are actually progressing. And if you're not, then what adjustments are we making? And that's a really interesting question as well as process, because people have different situations in a sport like tennis. Your coach may or may not be able to help you. Your situation with school and your studies and your access to certain tournaments and training may not be as good of a situation as somebody else is. You may have a lot of things that may hold you back. Budgets, finances. I mean, there's things that can happen, but how can you make the best of your situation? But there are always solutions to every problem. I truly believe that, and I think that everybody can have opportunity to grow. I mean, I'm just thinking back on my situation. I have friends that played, 5 hours a day. I have friends that played like 1 hour a day. I had someone like me that played 3 times a week for most of my life, only in the winters. And you can all get to a certain level. It's all achievable. It's quality over quantity often, and it's just making sure that you can, map that your training maps that your goals, and that you start looking at the results. So these are all interesting conversations to have in situations that you have to deal with. And I think that if you are doing that from a young age, then you have your best shot to go to get to the highest level. Now, the one thing that we never really think about is that we may want to get to the highest level and play at Stanford and Duke and all these schools that we all know that are on the world map. But the reality is that that takes a very, very special person, and that is less than 1% of the population that actually can achieve those academic and athletic abilities. So it's to understand that everybody wants to be there, but it takes a special individual to get there. It's like in pro sports, You want to be LeBron James? Well, everybody wants to be LeBron James or Roger Federer or Serena Williams. We may not get there, but we can get somewhere along the line and still go to a great university and have a great experience, and that will be a good fit for you, because that'll be a challenge for you. And there's no one saying holding anybody back, but that is the reality, right? Not everybody can be number one in the world, but can you be the best version of yourself? How do you maximize your potential? And I think as parents, at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for your kids, right? So you're looking for them to find a great fit at a college, university. You want them to have a great experience and an opportunity that is not like a regular student. Being a student athlete can open a lot of doors. It teaches you so much more. It teaches you how to become a better leader, how to manage your time. It teaches you how to face adversity. You get to travel and you get to compete, and you have a sense of belonging and an exclusive club that you're in, and you stay in shape and you have a lot of fun, and I mean, there's a million things I can tell you about my experience, and every student athlete will tell you. You know, today was really cool because we had one of the old ex-Penn tennis players who just graduated, who came down and played a little bit with the kids, and he gave 5 minutes of his spiel, and I've met him a few times while he was here over the years and gotten to know him, and like, he's one of those guys that just absolutely loved his student athlete experience, and now he's working nearby at a really big company, and his eyes light up. You can just tell everything's coming from inside, like his heart, that he had the greatest opportunity and experience possible. And I think that's the most important thing, is that to understand, if you're going to be a student athlete and maybe academically you can get to a slightly better school that you think is better rankings or name-wise, but you can't play tennis versus you can play tennis, and then that experience, what does that look like? You know, and I think the question that you have to ask your children and start to understand is that, you know, if you're going to get into certain schools academically, but there's not an opportunity to play tennis, and on the other side you can get into a certain set of schools and play tennis, but they're maybe not your dream schools academically, which way are you going to go? You know, I, for one, was one of those kids that wanted and needed to play college tennis. I mean, I was driven to continue playing my sport and being a part of my life. If I wasn't a student athlete, and like I told you, my last year as a senior, I wasn't, it was a really tough year for me. I loved the sport. I loved sports in general. I loved being on that team. I loved the experience and the opportunity, and that drove me to do everything else and be in the university. Otherwise, I wasn't really into the school so much, or in school, period. Then there are kids that say, you know, I like tennis and I'm going to play, but I'm not going to give up the academic school that I can go to have that student athlete experience. And it's a bit of a like and love situation. You know, I don't think enough kids understand the difference. You know, if you love tennis, then it's something you can't live without, especially as you're going through the collegiate years. But if you like it, then, you know, your expectations also have to map that and understand that maybe you don't go for that experience. I think on an educational standpoint, there's two parts of this too, is on the development side, we have to understand also that if you're trying to strive for the top schools, like, what does that really mean, right? What, like, is your behavior mapping to what those players and teams are requiring? You know, I think a lot of kids think they're working hard at times, they think they're pushing themselves, but they haven't really realized what that means. Just last week, I was talking to a boy that I sent to University of Miami. He's starting his first year, and he's, you know, a lot of kids that take their process seriously keep good connections with us throughout the years, even after we've helped them, and that's really cool because I get to follow them and they get to ask me advice, and I enjoy that relationship that we've built. But, you know, he was writing me all the last few weeks, and like, I'm doing really well in practice in the preseason, guys are training hard, and he's like, it's tough. And then he called me up the other day and he said, I just threw up at practice. And like on the track after they did their practice, but I won my match against, you know, one of the top players. And he goes, you know, I think, like, you know, if I keep working hard, I can make my way into the lineup on a very competitive team. And I had told him months ago that, you know, if you don't throw up, you're not really working that hard. Everybody, all these kids, they really got to throw up the first time because they never really trained in that environment. And so he told me, like, I've never ever trained that hard. I thought I was pushing myself, but this is the next level. And I think there's various levels of that we can do even as juniors, and we keep pushing ourselves. Like, even over here, you know, on day one, Friday, when we were out here, people were already like passing out almost. We were on the court for 2 hours. We weren't even doing like college intensity practices yet. We were just warming them up. You know, whether it was a lack of preparation, understanding, all that, and that's okay because that's why they're here. And today they were a little bit more conditioned, a little bit more prepared. And as they go through, they got to start doing that. I think that's very, very important. And that leads into my education. My education is that we need to get more educated early on about the process. From how many people here have taken their kids to see a college tennis match? Okay. How many people actually have done, extensive research, themselves and with their kids? Started to do some. Okay, good. I think it's really, really important to do that with your kids and to also encourage your kids to do that themselves. At the end of the day, the kid should be driving the recruiting process. Like if I'm working with kids, most of the time I'm eventually, if there's parents, I'm telling them that I want to hear from the kid the most. I want to work with them because they're the ones going and they should be understanding what they're doing the best. Like sometimes I think it's easy for anybody, even when we're teaching, like even school, teachers can sometimes be doing like math problems and stuff and you're kind of just watching and you're kind of getting it, but until you start putting the numbers up or you want to learn how to build a chair, like you can watch someone do it, but until you start doing it, it's a different experience and it's a different set of confidence too. You get confidence once you've done it a few times. And I think the more that we can start getting our kids to be involved with it, and start to learn more about it and understand, the more they're going to help find their fit. Did a really interesting exercise today with half the group that weren't playing their first singles match. Me and Coach Prasadi from Hamilton, we did a fun activity where I put up a whiteboard and we started playing like we were college coaches on a team, and we said, this is our university and we're going to role play here and say, okay, for 2020, like this is who we're trying to recruit, and these are the academic requirements we need, and et cetera, et cetera. And I really watched the kids learn a lot and get engaged and start to understand by interacting with them more about the possibilities. Most of them, there was one question that we asked is how many people have gotten emails from schools and not replied back to them? Like half of them put their hands up. And it's like, why? And it's a lack of education and understanding that some of those schools may actually be possibilities because none of them have actually built out a list of requirements and what they're looking for out of a school. Whether it's a certain major academically, whether it's a certain experience, what their goals are on the tennis team, and some of those colleges might be able to offer that to them. But just because we're judging them by their name, which is really judging a book by its cover, we don't know what they can offer us. Because I'll tell you, most people, including myself, had not heard about a lot of universities that I now personally know about. It's too easy. There's like 1,000 schools out there. But there's really some really great schools that can do a lot for you, especially when you're a student athlete. There's also been a lot of talk over the years about UTR and tennis recruiting, and I've been heavily involved with some of those conversations and done a lot of little videos on it. I've been getting a lot of kids that have come up to me and parents about their UTR, seriously worried about UTR. And the reality is this, and I'm being very transparent. When UTR first came out, they got college coaches to jump on board to help them promote it. That's fair because it was a good tool and is a good tool to have an idea where somebody can stand as a basic guideline. It's like step one. I mean, you have no idea sometimes if you have a kid from some city or country or place, if you've never even seen their stats or anything, you got no idea, so you're trying to get an idea where they fit. Are they, kind of like the lowest level or the highest level of college tennis? And what's happened is that we've been so fixated on the number that we're forgetting about what it actually represents. And so UTR is your universal tennis rating, and tennisrecruiting.net is mainly for Americans that will give you your rating and your national ranking. And this is a direct correlation to your results. That's all it is. UTR has become popular because there's no other place right now that people are collecting all the data from all the different tournaments that people play now, whether it's USTA in the USA here, whether it's ITF tournaments, ITA tournaments, UTR tournaments, whether you're in Canada and you're in a different country. Like, no one's got a system that tries to incorporate as many tournaments as possible into one system to then match you up against the world competition, because tennis is an international sport and college coaches are trying to recruit the best players around the world. So if you don't know how that player compares to against the rest of the world, it's very difficult. And then on the contrary, like college coaches have limited resources and time. So, and budgets, they don't have the ability to go fly around the world all the time and watch these players personally. So how do we start to get an idea of where somebody fits? Now, here's some of the challenges. UTR doesn't collect all the data from all the countries. And every single tournament, they don't. So, people think that, but they don't. There are countries where they don't. There are tournaments that they don't. There are still a lot of kinks in the system. And no system of data and stats are perfect. So you can, and coaches have become more and more educated on what actually is going on in certain countries and realizing that your UTR, which is your statistical rating, is not always perfectly accurate. Like, I see it every day. I just had a kid who's a 10.46 wipe a 11.2 player. Happens all the time, half a point, 1 point. Now, you can't say I'm a 12 UTR when really you're a 6 or 7. I mean, now it's the same thing by saying, you're a 2-star, but you play like a blue chip. 5-star, it's a big discrepancy there. That's different. I mean, we have enough data sources and match play against people to understand that it can't be that big a discrepancy. But if you're talking, within a point or here or there, if depending on how much they're doing, or you might not be rated, well, then that's different. And so, I want the parents here to take the pressure off your kids about looking at their UTRs and stuff. Last week, I live in Florida, in Miami, and there's a kid, Ronnie Holman, who's the top under 18 player in the country. And he trains with my buddy Todd Whittam in Florida, in the Boca area. And so I went up there, and I've known them for a long time, and I've watched Ronnie grow up, and I did a little video with them that I'm going to release. And I asked Ronnie some questions straight up. I said, how often did you look at your UTR? He's like, once or twice a month. Why? When? For what? And he's like, just to see how I'm doing in some of those tournaments and so on, but I'm not obsessed over it, and there's no reason to be. Like, I am winning matches and progressing, and I can see that through my results, and that's all that matters. And the rankings and ratings will speak for themselves. So, I think like the emphasis has gone from, instead of improving and actually letting everything speak for itself, we're worried about how can we manipulate the UTR so that we can get to a certain number and then a college coach will recruit me. It doesn't work that way. First of all, there's no cheating the system, and if you think there is, that's a shortcut that's never going to work for you. And secondly, it's not productive. You're not going to get much further ahead. So, like, imagine you just didn't look at your UTR for 3 months, and you just went out there and played and worked on improving your game and go to tournaments and see that improvement and win matches and get results. That UTR will go up, and even if it doesn't go up, it's like, well, who cares about that? Like, you're playing, the coaches will look at the matches you're playing. The last thing I want to touch on here is that whole recruiting process and how it all comes together now is, being educated can help you guys a lot, but you will never, ever understand the full picture. It's just the reality. It's a very complex system with a lot of rules and a lot of things that change and variables that come in. And you don't really want to learn everything. You want to learn what's needed for your specific situation. This is something that everybody does once, the kid does once, and then never again. So it's not something you're going to invest in terms of like your own time so much, because it's not a skill that you're going to build on. But the skills that you are going to build on are your communication skills, and your ability to problem solve and market yourself and all those things, which is why I always want the kids to take control of it, because there are life skills that come out of it. And most importantly, you can help find your best fit. But as far as the intricacies of the process, it can be difficult at times, but if you set up a game plan and you understand where you fit, that is the most important thing you can do as your first step to then know what direction you're going to go. So I'll just give you examples. Like, there's kids that come to me and their families, and they get evaluated, and we assess it, and we find a target list of schools, and they decide, based on where I am today and how I'm going to improve over the next year or two, or however much time they have left, I don't think I'm going to give up the academic schools that I can get into to go play college tennis. And thank you very much, and that's it. And that's a good reality check, because it's a relief at times. I've been investing so much and stressing over it, and now I can go and continue to play the sport I enjoy playing, but more recreationally, and still play tournaments and all that, but I'm going to maybe go play club tennis. Then there's kids that come in and their families, and they say, all right, well, I want to get here, and they're currently here. Well, and then they work on that, and there's certain steps that they need to take to be successful. And, there's things that everybody needs to do, but it's very, very personalized. And I think that the challenge is the timing and the education, as well as understanding how coaches recruit for their teams. There is no shortcut with contacting and communicating coaches to find out, what their requirements are. Parents are often raising hands in Q&As and questions saying, well, what does this coach do? What does this school do? And even if we understand some minimums, we need to know who they're recruiting and what they're recruiting for that specific year. And you have to see how you fit in that piece of the puzzle. And that is really where the time and effort needs to be put in. And, if you're negotiating scholarships, that's another part of the animal. How to get yourself a competitive edge. What are the X factors that you have? Bringing out the good qualities of the student athlete is important. Once you start, going through that, and you start realizing that there's opportunities with certain schools, how can you convince that coach to take you? So it's a long journey. It's definitely, it can be simplified. I think that if you guys take the appropriate steps, then you can have a good pathway to success. And I truly believe that every kid here, for example, has the opportunity to play college tennis. They do. And it just depends at what level and at what cost. And if those schools fit your needs and wants, and you can enjoy that athletic experience. So I wanted to open the floor up for some questions here for you guys to ask me. Again, I hope this is some food for thought and way for you guys to start thinking about how you're managing and helping your kids. Because remember, this is like the big decision that the kids are making in their lives, and the first big decision that they're going to make, after now for their next step in their career. And this is hopefully going to map out what they can do. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Your opinion of club tennis?
Yeah, sure. So look, for anybody not know what club tennis is versus competitive tennis for a collegiate team, you want me to explain? Okay. So I'll explain for those who may not understand. So we have collegiate tennis, which are governed by the NCAA or NAIA. Those are your competitive tennis teams that you're playing for the university. Club tennis is where you can join on a recreational side that the school offers as an extracurricular activity. Every school generally has tennis and golf and soccer and all these, sports that they do. What's interesting about tennis is that you will get a lot of good club teams where they, depending on the school, can have a good person who's president of that club that they'll go out and play other schools as well from club teams and go on trips and train have some fun. It's definitely not the competitive tennis that you're going to get through, there's no scholarships involved or anything like that. It's something that you can just join, unless it's a very competitive team that may have tryouts. There still may be some tryout involved, but most likely you can just go there and you can be part of that. And it's a way for players to continue to play their sport in university without having to give it up completely, right? In some cases, when you have the kid that I was talking about who will not give up that academic school they can get into, but can't play competitive, like, NCAA tennis for example, like, it's just a way, it's another way for them to do that. And I think in that situation, it's great. It's like, hey, you can still hit some tennis balls around and have some fun with it, because that's the school you want to go to. Not really. It's not really, it's not your competitive NCAA governed body, like going to play other schools all the time, and there's, yeah.
Well, we're from Columbus, and
Yeah.
Ohio State's got a club team, and they won the national championship. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But so obviously they do something, and because my son hears all these good stories about how good it is to play club, and I just have no idea.
No, look, I know a lot of people that have played club tennis that have really, really enjoyed it. It's similar to being like a member of a country club or a tennis program, and you play in the summer league club. Like, you're a team, you still play other teams, and you go in, you have it's like your high school teams, things like that. Some will have like managers, coaches to help them out. Not everybody will. It varies. When you're playing at the big schools, and there's usually a lot of kids that are involved in it, so it can be a lot of fun. And it's a great alternative to if you want to go to the school you want to academically, and there's no tennis opportunity there, then at least you get to continue to enjoy the game and have fun with it. Yeah.
What's the difference of intensity level of Division 1 to Division 3 schools?
The intensity level of Division 1 to Division 3 schools.
Division
Okay.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
what level of commitment do you need?
sure. Great question. So what level of commitment? There is no distinction necessarily between 1, 2, and 3 in terms of commitment. That depends on the school and the level of competitiveness that school is at. So, look, I can give you some direction there. If you're looking at sort of the top 50 schools, NCAA 1, USC's and Duke's and Miami's and Florida's and Ohio State's and all those schools, Georgia's, those schools at those highest level are in another category, because the players that are going there are players that have played at a very, very high level, that are, a level or two below the pros, depending on what pro circuit you're talking about, challengers and up. So those players are the next level, and the commitment and the training is super high and intense. It all depends, like we can go, into the exact details of what the NCAA requires, which I can, which you can look up. But the commitment level is high and the pressure is on, because those teams are required to win, and those coaches' jobs are way more volatile because they're so competitive. They're higher paid jobs generally, and they're looking for results. Outside from that, there are Division 3 teams that I see are more intense than Division 1 and 2 teams, vice versa, Division 2s that might be more intense than 1s, et cetera, et cetera. It depends team by team and school by school and coach by coach. There are a certain amount of hours that are allowed in each division and league, but that also depends on conferences sometimes. So it can become very complex. And again, there are ways, like people like myself, like I know that stuff a little bit more. I can put together a list of schools that are a little more demanding versus a little less demanding, understanding how the coaches and the teams work and the conferences work with the amount of hours they train. But it does vary. It's not based on the division so much. And that's one of the misconceptions. College tennis is not always, Division 1 being the best. 2, 3, like we're used to in, especially soccer, right? Like, we always know the first division, second, third, that's been built that way to show the levels, and then you level up. You don't level up like Division 2 schools. If you win, your conference or national championship. You don't go up to Division I. That is determined based on the number of sports the school offers and the budgets and a whole bunch of things that are involved. So I hope that was a good enough answer for you. Yeah. And then coaches run their systems differently, right? So if certain coaches will be more demanding than others, and the expectations can vary. Yeah.
You left a lot of questions unanswered in your speech.
Sure.
A lot of things is on parents' mind. What is the, right process? I understand everybody has its own situation, right? So you really can't give one fits all.
Correct. Correct.
So, there's a lot of recruiting firms out there as well. They advertise they can help you kids to get in contact with the coaches. They do all the communications for you. They have some sort of system track your progress. Are you running a firm yourself? Provide such services?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I have a. Would you like me to elaborate on that?
Because there's a lot of information out there.
Yes. Yes.
Inundated with all the information.
Yes.
What are the right information? What are wrong information? Your question you're asking, how do you know you are fit to the college, right? Or,
Yes.
or the coach think you're a good fit for that particular year of recruitment.
Yes.
Either they need a line 2 in the doubles,
Yeah.
or they need a line 3 in the singles, right? It all depends on what kid's gonna graduate in that year. So not just based on how good your kids are, it's more so what I hear from you is how fit your kids is to the team.
Correct. Yeah.
How do we go
About that,
the process?
yeah.
It's mind-blowing at this point.
Sure. That's a great question. I mean, I'm always going to be candid. I think I haven't seen anybody else in the recruiting space that has been doing as much content as I've started to do for people and been as candid with the families. I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of recruiting firms out there that are blowing a lot of smoke, and they don't really know what to do. They don't really pay much attention. I think some of their business models are broken, but then there's some that do a very, very good job. There is so much information, you're right, out there right now, and it's hard when you Google, and that's why I made the point, I actually tell people, don't listen to the noise, which means don't listen to anybody. I'd actually prefer if everybody didn't talk about recruiting with each other so much, because I feel like people get more and more confused. I have clients of mine whose parents call me up and say, oh, well, I just heard so-and-so tell me this, and it's very frustrating for someone like me who says, no, we've built a plan, we know our goals, this is what we're going to do with your son or your daughter. Remember the pathway. Don't worry about what Sally did because she has a different situation than you. And so, I don't think I'm never going to be able to stop all the people that are just throwing information out there without real education or real understanding of what the business is and what the facts are. But what I can do is just try to be as trusted of a resource as possible, and there are people like myself who are in it 24/7, I don't do anything else, like our team, we are 100% invested to working with college coaches and students every day, from being with them and hiring them at these events to talking to them on a daily basis. And that is where the fit comes into play. If you truly have connections with college coaches and you're helping hundreds of players and you are placing them on a daily basis, weekly and yearly basis, then you know what these coaches are looking for because they're talking to you all the time, because they're giving you what they're looking for, and you're trying to slot your players into those positions. At the same time, you have to have a very good strategy and game plan. And one of the reasons why I started the business was, again, I had somebody that I hired, I had my friends that did, and all these things were left on the table that weren't addressed, because most people are just taking everybody in and then making a couple calls and then that's it. What happened to building a game plan? What happened to creating a timeline? What happened to going through the steps one by one and checking them off as you go along? You know, what happened to actually putting some structure to the process? And then having the insider information and knowledge from these coaches, and then being able to have the actual relationships with these coaches where you can pick up your phone and you can call them, and they not only answer your calls, but they actually feel that you're a trusted resource because you're in it and you have the credentials. You know, you've played the game. You've either, like my friends, for example, and are personally either college coaches now, or they run their own programs, or they're coaches that when I was playing, had played against, or were trying to recruit me, for example. You know, like if you are in it, and that's why I think it's a very specialty business, right? I mean, it's one of those things that not everybody, I think, can do. And I have spent the years doing that, and there are other people that have done that as well. But as I mentioned, this is kind of like a cool business for people to be in. So they feel like if they just played the sport, they can now open up their agency and like all of a sudden they can help you. I can assure you that, you know, when I first started, I'm nowhere as knowledgeable as I am today. And every day I continue to get more and more knowledgeable. But there's a certain point when you invest your time into helping on a daily basis where you can provide that expertise. And that's the kind of people you have to find. I'm also not in the business to only self-promote myself. I'm saying to families that, you know, you find a company or a person that you can work with who you feel has these expertise, skills, and contacts and relationships, and has a plan for you that can help you walk you through it. And if you do, then you can be successful. Just like you go to school and the teacher gives you a syllabus at the beginning, and a very good teacher can manage that and stay on track and actually take you through the progression and make sure that you become successful. Does that help?
I don't know, do you have some success cases about with placement?
Oh, tons. Tons. I think anybody who does it well does, right? You're gonna have all kinds of success cases that we can share with everybody. Yeah, I mean, if you know, the bottom line is that it's taking the player's academics, athletics, and financial situation, personal preferences, and putting that all together, and finding the schools that can give you the majority of those. And some things that are non-negotiable, for example, we can look at, and we can adjust. I think we got time for just one more question, if there is. We'll wrap it up. So, yeah.
I had my allotment already. I'll let anybody else go.
Yeah, anybody else?
What about walk-ons?
Walk-ons.
If you don't
Yeah.
if not, if your ideal
Great.
school didn't recruit you, but sure you want to show up and walk.
So I'll say one thing before I say that. I have this thing called T Academy. It's my little academy classes I do on the YouTube show. I just did a walk-on thing, so I hope I'll share it with you, and then you can check it out. But the short answer is that being a walk-on can be a good situation if the coach is willing to take you on and you're willing to take that spot, and it's a win-win situation, if that's what you're willing to do. Sometimes coaches will take you as a walk-on, but they won't give you much attention, and then it could be a bad situation. So you have to, if you're being offered a walk-on spot, you have to really make sure that it's going to be something that you're going to be willing to entertain, and that the expectations of the coach and you are going to be aligned, and that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Because if it's a scholarship school, sometimes coaches will be invested, sometimes not. It all depends. But it can be, I've had kids that have walked on many times that have had a great time and have really done well. Some kids I know of, I will encourage not to do, and they can, but I'll share that video with you, and it's a good 10 minutes or so on walk-ons. Okay, I want to thank you guys for your time. I know the kids are pretty tired. I'll let you guys go. We will do a follow-up email. We have a webinar that you guys can watch. We have some seminars from the other camps that we've done as well that you can watch that are slightly different to these talks. And yeah, we thank you very much for bringing your kids here, and we'll entertain anybody who wants to have a conversation further. Like, I know you might have more questions and others, and I'm happy to help you guys. Okay? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.